Two friends, Alan Dale and Jerry Carew, who grew up just a few streets apart in St. John's East End, have been separated by Canada's geography for 3 decades. They came together virtually during the pandemic to chat about like-minded interests. Alan lives in PEI and Jerry in Newfoundland. Thriving in remoteness has been a common theme for both of them during the pandemic. Gale Force Wins, the podcast is the result.
And welcome to Gale Force Wins. I'm Alan Dale, and with me as always, my good buddy from the East End of St. John's, Jerry Carew. How are you, Jerry?
Doing well, Alan. We're getting into July here now at the time of this recording, so the weather has actually turned poor into July. But what you and I are doing is pretty exciting. The people that we've been talking to, in our preamble with Michelle, we were talking about how many hours we've got recorded. The people are just inspirational, and the person that we have today, Michelle Sims, is at the epicenter of a technological revolution, I think, in St. John's. So, Alan, I'm just looking forward to digging in.
Absolutely, Jerry. So many great stories of success coming out of Newfoundland, and all of those ideas and those concepts have to originate somewhere. There's a genesis behind it all somewhere, and we're so pleased to have Michelle Sims, the CEO and president of the Genesis Center in St. John's, Newfoundland, to talk to us today. I can't wait to get into the conversation. So, Michelle, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Thank you, Alan and Jerry, so much for inviting me to participate in Gale Force Wins. I've been following you on social media, and so far it's been amazing. As mentioned, my name is Michelle Sims. I'm the president and CEO of Genesis. And at Genesis, we exist to help build amazing companies. We work almost exclusively with high growth technology companies. And at present, we have about 20,000 square feet of space in the city of St. John's that we use to house technology companies. And we've been working with them for about 25 years in total. A long-standing history now. Lots of great successful companies have come through the Genesis Center. Our clients and grads have raised over $620 million in investment. 97% of that has come from outside of the province of Newfoundland and Labrador. And they've created more than 2,000 jobs. So we're very proud of the companies that we serve, and very proud of the work that we get to do every day.
Michelle, the Genesis Center sounds amazing, and I can't wait to dive into it. I know that you're perched on the top of Signal Hill with a commanding view of St. John's Harbor, and I think that's probably by design too. You want to be on top and overlooking, and these ideas are generated from a pretty high altitude look at what you want to do, and that's a great location to be in. In fact, when I was a young fellow, I used to go swimming right there in the Battery Hotel, so it's near and dear to my heart, that part of St. John's for sure. Michelle, but I'd like to know a little bit about you. Where did you start? How did you find yourself in the epicenter of this incredible organization?
Well, I've often reflected on that myself. So I was born and raised in St. Anthony, Newfoundland and Labrador on the northern coast. And I was born into a second generation family business. And so my parents, both of them, are entrepreneurs and have been their entire life. They have gone from trucking company to games arcades to furniture stores to hardware stores and real estate and everything in between. So it's been fun growing up in that environment. I would say I had a fairly non-traditional upbringing because I was, pulled into the business at various points in time to help when I could at very young ages. And that gave me incredible exposure and incredible insight into what it's like to be an entrepreneur. So I think I always knew that I was going to follow the entrepreneurial journey. I think my parents are a little disappointed, perhaps, that I didn't start my own company, but I think they're excited that I get to work with other entrepreneurs every single day. I moved to St. John's to go to university back in the early or the late 90s, I guess, and I've been here ever since. I have two young boys at home, one 9 and one 13, and they're very exciting, very energetic, and I draw a lot of energy from them for sure. They're very athletic, so I'm a hockey mom, a soccer mom, a karate mom, a baseball mom, kind of doing it all. But it's very exciting.
Yeah, you're spinning a lot of plates by the sounds of it.
I have two boys. Michelle. I was coaching at one point 3 teams, and that was something else. I did 10 years of that, and I've graduated now from that to having some time to myself on Saturdays, which is nice. But you do miss that. Believe me. Enjoy it while you're doing it because it goes quick.
Yeah, we missed it in COVID times for sure.
Michelle, tell me a little bit about around the kitchen table in St. Anthony as mom and dad were growing these businesses.
Yeah, so they had a lot on their plate, and they still do. Lots of everything from working in a fishery business to trucking to furniture store to games arcades, and they always talk business around the kitchen table. They're partners in their business, and so they brought their work home with them. We ended up moving into a house that was adjacent to their building, which is the furniture store. And so, the people were always coming by the house looking for furniture or looking for, to pick up this or purchase that or what have you. And so it was always a very hectic lifestyle, I guess, growing up. And I just become accustomed to that, but also a very exciting one because I got to see firsthand, and especially both of my parents have been incredible role models. So I got to see firsthand, just how entrepreneurs operate and how it's not a 9-to-5 business by any stretch. I mean, there would be times when we were little kids that my mom would work at home with us during the day, and then at night when we go to bed, she'd go to work and pretty much would work all night long. So, it wasn't easy for them, I'm sure, but from my perspective, it was exciting to watch.
It certainly builds a strong work ethic for anybody looking on, right? And obviously, brothers, sisters, are they entrepreneurial as well?
I have a sister. She works for a family business in Halifax, Nova Scotia. So she hasn't been bitten by the entrepreneurial bug herself either, but she is working in a family business. So I would say she's been with the same company now for well over a decade. So I would say she's pretty well entrenched with the entrepreneurial lifestyle and life set as well.
It's funny that you mentioned being bitten by the entrepreneurial bug. We have had a lot of entrepreneurs on the podcast, and oftentimes, and people often ask, oh, that person's made it. Why are they still going? Why are they starting something else? What is it about that entrepreneur that they just keep going and they want something new? And it's not, I think it ceases to become about financial gain. It's just a way of their being. Do you want to talk to that a little?
I think it's passion. Some entrepreneurs that you see that, are still going decades later, it's because they found things that they're incredibly passionate about, whether that is, safety of people, whether that is changing the world through, fighting climate change or food insecurity or what have you. It's those things that keep them going, and they see the picture bigger than many of us, right? Because they look at it and say, and there are so many inspirational leaders in our community. If you think about it, they just see the world and the picture a little bit bigger, and they see the opportunities and the challenges that need to be solved. And from my perspective, with the entrepreneurs that I've worked with, over the last 20 years, a lot of it is because they're very, very purpose-driven individuals.
Right. Tell me about St. Anthony. What was it like growing up in St. Anthony?
So it's one of my favorite places in the entire world. It's a small community. When I grew up, of course, it was much bigger because the fishery was pretty successful and substantial in the area. So there would have been about 6,000 people living in the community. Unfortunately, it's down to, I think, about 3,000 people right now. But Dr. Grenfell's legacy has had a pretty big impact on the community. Many of my friends, including myself, growing up, worked in the Dr. Grenfell, properties and museum, and so it was just an exciting place to grow up. It was a small community. We were very outdoorsy and active, snowmobiling and snowshoeing and all of those sorts of things. Skiing and everything was just expected. You grow up in an area where it snows 10 months of the year, then you get used to those outdoor activities. I think people there, and I struggled with this when I first moved to St. John's, because when I came here, I didn't know anyone in this community, or very few. People in St. Anthony are very neighborly. And so if you ever find yourself in a situation where you need something, you just go knock on someone's door and they're eager to help. And I'm sure the same, now having lived in St. John's for 20 years, I can say the same is true for here. But it was a big adjustment moving from a small community like that to this large community, and to the university where, there were 20,000 approximate students on campus at any given point in time, when my whole community had no more than 5,000. So it was a big adjustment.
Michelle, I have a quick story about St. Anthony. I actually used to be in the digital transformation of the newspaper business, and my role was to travel the island. So my mom, who lived in Halifax, actually would travel with me periodically. So this one time I said, Mom, I've got to go to St. Anthony. So we literally, she was here in St. John's, got in the car, drove straight to St. Anthony. We stopped 3 times to have coffee and tea, but what a wonderful visit we had. And it's an incredible memory of my mom, who just recently passed away. So I just wanted to mention that. Great.
Awesome.
And the people that we worked with there are just phenomenal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the people there are incredible.
Yeah.
Michelle, tell us about, in one of our first podcasts, was a woman who grew up in Grand Bank, and we asked her about that trip on the Slaney's taxi into St. John's to go to university, and she talked passionately about that kind of first experience moving to St. John's. And what was that like for you, coming from St. Anthony?
Yeah, it was obviously a very exciting time when you're 18 years old and you get to move away from home and move to a new world. It is obviously something that's very exciting. It was nerve-wracking and scary, of course, but I had lots of friends from grade 12, and they were some that were in their second year of university that I got to hang out with and spend a lot of time with. And I think you get to know and build closer and stronger relationships with people when you're in your first couple of years of university, because it's just you and them, and you've kind of got to figure things out together. We had lots of fun, and it was exciting times. I did the Bachelor of Business Administration program at MUN, so I worked pretty well through my entire degree. I worked at the Y Enterprise Center. I started when I was a student in a summer job at the Y, and they offered me the opportunity to stay on through the fall and winter. And I took that, and I think I ended up being there for a total of just shy of 5 years. So almost the entire time that I was going through university, I was working with them. And that gave me an incredible opportunity to get to know people in the St. John's area and meet business people and what have you. So it really worked out well.
Mom and Dad must have been incredibly proud that you were heading off to do a business degree with their business background.
Yeah, although I will say that for the last 20 plus years, they've been begging me to start my own company. So I think they would, they are very proud, of course, but I think they would like it a whole lot more if I was to start something of my own, or to go back and work with them and take over. So they're super proud, but also wanting their daughters to follow in their footsteps, I guess.
Michelle, I have a sense, and I don't know all the board members of the Genesis Center, but I would be sure that they do not want your parents to influence you to go anywhere at this stage, given the growth and success that the Genesis Center has had. But I can't speak for the board because I don't know them. But
so, Michelle,
no, that's for sure. Yeah.
There's no doubt that you're helping start a lot of companies, or certainly helping those companies get underway, if not your own. And I'm sure it's like anything, all in good time, I'm sure, as Brian Tobin used to say, all in good time. So on that note, now let's talk a little bit about how you found your way to the Genesis Center. How did you make your way there?
Yeah, actually, my career path has been pretty linear compared to a lot of other people. So as I mentioned, I worked at the Y Enterprise Center for just shy of 5 years. The last year that I was at the Y Enterprise Center, I was offered an opportunity to work on a project called Genesis Web. And Genesis Web was a virtual incubator. So it was, late 90s, early 2000s. Of course, the dot-com bust was happening. And we had, I guess, through the Y and a partnership with the Genesis Center, we had established a virtual incubator that was servicing the entire province of Newfoundland and Labrador. And we were offering business consulting over the internet, which was sort of, the first of its kind in Newfoundland and Labrador at that time. And so I took over that program. We grew the number of participants from about 5 to, I think, 44 by the time the project shut down. We ended up losing funding for it, and I think it was starting to get momentum, but it was just too late, and we ended up losing funding for the initiative. And so my time with the Y was coming to an end, and the Genesis Center had an opening for 5 months for a business analyst. And so they said, you did a great job on the Genesis Web project. Would you consider coming over with us for 5 months? And that'll give you plenty of time to, start your job search and look for something else. And I said, absolutely. And 5 months have turned into 19 years, 19 years this month.
Oh, wow.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So you must have the most corporate knowledge of anybody at the Genesis Center?
Yeah, well, certainly right now I do, for sure. We've had some long-term employees in the past, but of the current crop of us, I certainly have been the longest standing employee.
Tell us about the team at the Genesis Center. Tell us about the group that you work with.
The team at Genesis is absolutely incredible. I am so blessed to be able to work with them every day. I have superstars on my team. I have, former founders. Several of our team members are founders and, have had their own companies before, one of which was a client of the Genesis Center previously with his company. And so that's really exciting to be able to see him in action every day with our companies. We have, accounting professionals on staff that are just amazing at what they do. Very skilled, very knowledgeable. I have a marketing and communications coordinator who has a ton of knowledge and works really closely with our companies, making sure that they get the exposure that they deserve, and that, our stories and their stories are getting shared regularly. I'm just incredibly blessed with the team that we have, because they're absolutely amazing.
That's great. Spoken like a true leader. Absolutely. Michelle, we often talk about with our guests about the importance of the collaboration between community, industry, government, and academia. Those 4 big pillars which in many cases sometimes tend to be siloed up. And it takes organizations and groups like yourself to break down those silos and allow everybody to work collaboratively together. And when that happens, beautiful things happen.
Mm-hmm.
Success happens, and it's so. And what we're finding is that there's so much of that in Newfoundland at the moment, and perhaps has been for a very long time, but we've not really looked at it through that lens. Talk to me a little bit about that collaboration, specifically in Newfoundland. What is it about Newfoundland and Labrador where people just want to see others succeed? What is it about that?
Yeah, so, there's been so much, as you've been discussing there, so much going through my mind. I think it's one of the keys of success. We just talked about team. Obviously, team is a critical success factor. And what you just described is, as Dr. Rob Greenwood at the university would describe, is the quadruple helix, right? Of, government working with industry, working with university, working with others. So it is a key to our success at Genesis. Without the entrepreneurs and the graduates of Genesis giving back to our community, without the ACOAs and the provincial government providing financial support for our organization, without the university and the city of St. John's providing us with space and additional services to operate, and without other supporting groups like our sponsors and whatnot, Genesis just wouldn't exist, and we wouldn't be able to do the great work that we're doing today. And so, one of the most important things for us is making sure that we have a very collaborative startup community. We work really closely with the Memorial Centre for Entrepreneurship. We work really closely with TechNL, and with a number of other partners and players in Newfoundland and Labrador. And that is so important to us because it's through those partnerships and through those collaborations that you build the best startups. It truly does take a village to raise a startup. You cannot have just the Genesis Centre alone and working in a silo and expect to get a Verifin or expect to get a Genoa Design, because each of those organizations, the Heyorkas, the Milk Movements, all of those companies have relied on the supports of all of us and many more besides. So it truly does take a village. And I think there probably was a period of time where we weren't working as collaboratively in this province as we should have been or could have been. I would say all of that is gone now. We work really closely together as a startup community. We collaborate on things. We, engage with entities like Eastern Health, with, entities like NELCHI, with several departments in the government, immigration department, finance department, and others. So it really is starting to work together. And you alluded to, well, why is that? What is that about Newfoundland and Labrador? And I think we've come to the realization, and maybe it took us a few trips of, going to Waterloo or going to Silicon Valley to figure this out. But we've come to the realization that you have to work together in order to build the successful companies, because what a company needs in year one is very different from what they need in year 5. And what they need when they're at $1 million in sales is very different from what they need when they're at 10 million or $100 million in sales. And so you need the supports, and you need people to be working together and connecting the dots. And so, for example, we've had a talent issue in this province for the last number of years in the tech sector, and we've worked very closely with, and when I say we, it's TechNL and Genesis and the graduate companies have worked very closely with Memorial University and the College of the North Atlantic and private colleges like Kean. And what is resulting from that is more programming, more students, more graduates, which results in better and more talent. So, it does take that full and concerted effort sometimes.
Fantastic. to hear that. Now, Michelle, that what you described, everybody, every community you go to across, I mean, around the globe have these tech startups and these innovative hubs and all of this, but they're not producing the Verafins and the Kraken Robotics and the Genoa Designs, and they're not, and the Blue Drops, they're not sprouting out in the numbers that's happening in Newfoundland. What is it about Newfoundland and Labradorians that makes all of this tick? What is it about them? What's in their genetics that makes all of this work?
Well, I think we're collaborative by nature. I mean, you have to be, if you grew up in Newfoundland and Labrador, especially if you were connected to the fishery, you have to rely on your neighbors, and that's really the culture in which we all grew up in this province. Is that we work together, we support one another. You know, when someone is down and out, everyone else is around them to help and help lift them up. So, you know, there is a bit of that in our blood, I think, and in our culture, but also I would say we've also learned a lot about startup communities and how they operate. A number of people in our community have visited Israel. I've visited Silicon Valley a number of times. I've been in Waterloo many times. We've all read the books about, you know, Brad Feld's books about startup communities, and have taken away lots of really great tips from that. He always talks about the give first model in startup communities, and how, you know, you give with your time, you give with your money, you give with your advice and your you know, and your guidance, and entrepreneurs will gain from that, and your startup community will grow and build and strengthen from that. And so, you know, many people in this community have taken on that mantra, whether they know it or realize it or not. It certainly has been, you know, something that we've all worked very diligently on. We work with, at Genesis, mentors and advisors, and oftentimes we're relying on people from outside of the province of Newfoundland and Labrador. Maybe they're expatriate Newfoundlanders and Labradorians, or they've, you know, been alumni of Memorial. But when we call them up and ask them to work with or speak to a startup company or an entrepreneur in our network, they immediately say when and how much time, because they're just so eager to give back, and they want to see Newfoundland and Labrador succeed, and they just, you know, they value that opportunity to be able to give back to the startup community we have here.
What a recipe for success.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
Well, you know, Alan, all I can think about, everyone is always trying to find the secret sauce of this, that, and the other thing. Well, guess what? Michelle has just, I think, articulated what the secret sauce is. I just want to jump in there because, you know, I'm working with Newfound Development in a business development role, Newfound Marketing, sorry. And one of the things that I'm really impressed with, is the internship programs that are going on. And kudos to TechNL for this. But I spent 30 years in a retail advertising environment with an older organization that didn't really get into the co-op program. But I can tell you, Michelle, the young people that are coming through Newfound Marketing are incredibly talented. And I, with 30 years experience, I feel really excited about being able to show them a little bit of my experience. Mm-hmm. Not perfect, but I'll give them at least that push. 2 high school students just started with us through the high school internship program. It was funny, you know, they were sitting and they were just so frightened to death, I'm sure. You know, they're sitting in front of this gray-haired old guy, and I'm pretty easygoing. I was trying to warm them up. And I think the really important part about young people is not being afraid to ask questions. We did a podcast recently where that was brought up. So anyway, I just wanted to talk a little bit about that, you know, and there's companies like Newfound Marketing, but there's others in this community that I think need to step up to help train these young people, because, you know, there's enough business for everybody, and these young people can really contribute. So anyway, I'll get off my soapbox, but I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, so I'll start with the internship program, but I want to lead into a greater or grander conversation around diversity, because I think, and it's something that I've been super passionate about. And I know, many members of our startup community have been very passionate about. The internship program is one that is just amazing, and we love it. And, Verifin, I think, perhaps started the trend. They brought in 20 or 30 high school students a couple of summers ago and let them work at Verifin for the summer and get that exposure. And it sort of snowballed from there. But, one of the things that we have seen a lot in the startup community is, and in my, years of work experience, I haven't really seen it to this extent before. We're engaging youth more now than ever. And I think 20 years ago, you would hire, a young person to come in and give them a job to do and say, here's your job, do it. Now what's different is that they're giving them a job to do, but they're also saying, how would you do it? And they're asking their opinions and their advice, and they're looking for different ways of doing the work, and they're looking for, their input. And we didn't do that 20 or 30 years ago. I certainly wasn't asked my opinion when I was 18 or 19 years old. It was just, here's the job, you need to do it. And it's a different way of looking at things. And I think, some of those young people, all of them actually have such incredible insights, incredible knowledge. And oftentimes they can just look at a problem differently. And my 9-year-old son is a great example of that. He challenges everything, and not in a bad way. He looks at problems and looks at things, and he sees them differently than I do. And what would take me perhaps 20 minutes to figure out a solution to this problem, he solved it in 5 minutes because he's just thinking about it differently. And so we need to engage that in those young people, and I think that's where the magic really happens, right? Yeah. To lead over into diversity, because youth is a subset of diversity. At Genesis, about 6 or 7 years ago now, we became incredibly focused on diversity. And in particular, we focused early on trying to get more women in the technology sector, and also trying to recruit more immigrants into the technology sector. And so some of those, immigrants we would be looking for in the community already. Maybe they're international students at Memorial, or maybe they relocated to Newfoundland and Labrador. But also we have a program called the Startup Visa Program, which is a Government of Canada program. And it helps us recruit internationally for tech entrepreneurs that want to move to this province to start and grow their tech company. And so, I think the ultimate value in building out diversity and inclusion efforts in the technology sector is that we just simply can't do it and won't grow our sector if we keep focusing on one subset of the, of the demographic. We need to prove and show that the technology sector is inclusive and that it's available to everyone, and that anyone of any gender, any sex, any race should be encouraged to participate. And then the other thing is that technology companies are working on some of the world's biggest problems: how to solve food insecurity, how to put people on Mars, how to create autonomous vehicles. In order to do that, you really do need all minds, and you need creative people and talented people. And so in order to do that, you need to make sure that you're building an inclusive company, and a company that has diversity of thought. So it's become important to us, and we know it's become important to the startup community in Newfoundland and Labrador as well. Maybe it's another secret to success, who knows?
Well, 100%. And I think hand in glove with that is that Newfoundland is a fairly welcoming place. Mm-hmm. People, when they come to Newfoundland, they feel that warm embrace of the culture that's there, the art and the music and everything embraces them, and yet they're opened. Newfoundland and Labradorans are open to embracing other people's culture in there. So it's just a natural flow into the business sector. And again, to name some of the great companies that have come through your doors, Genoa Design is a great example of that. What a wonderful, inclusive company that is. I mean, talking to Len and Gina, you almost want to go to work there right away. It just, they invite you in, you know what I mean? So I take your point 100%. And it's really nice to see that you have a razor focus on that, because it's something that sometimes we get set in our ways. Oh, we're doing business this way. But you're so right. We need to be looking at challenges globally through all the lenses, not just one or two lenses. We need all the lenses, because there are some challenges in the world that need to be solved, and you've named a number of them. Where do you see Genesis going in the future? What's on the horizon? What's exciting about what's on the horizon for you, and why should people pay attention to Genesis right now?
Yeah, so, we have some very exciting things that we launched earlier this year. And in the midst of the pandemic, we weren't sure that we were going to be able to, but I'm very excited that they've come to fruition. Genesis now has, a bookend on the downtown, if you will. We're at the base of Signal Hill, and we also are in the Railway Coastal Museum building on the west end of Water Street as well. So we have the top two floors of that building, and we have, approximately 10 to 15 tech companies working out of that space. We have about 10 to 15 working here at our Signal Hill space as well. And we also have our co-working facility in the Railway Coastal Museum downtown. So it's hustle and bustle with our spaces, and that's really exciting. We also launched an Evolution Plus program, which is a program that bridges the gap between our Evolution program, which is an early stage idea validator program for early stage entrepreneurs, and our flagship program called Enterprise. So the Evolution Plus program is meant to be provide people with a 6-month runway to help them get to that next level, and to build out their product a little further, to understand their market a little better, to understand their sales process and all of that stuff. So we're really excited about where that's going to take us. And aside from that, we're just very focused on building the community and growing the community. So we've all heard the news about Newfoundland and Labrador, and we've seen the PERT report, the Premier's Economic Recovery report. Newfoundland and Labrador has some challenges, and they're not new challenges, but I think the report certainly laid them out in a way that people are having lots of conversations about them. Our job, as we see it, is to keep creating more companies, keep encouraging entrepreneurs to start technology companies, and ultimately with the goal of creating more Verafins and more Genoas and more Heyorkas and more Misas. So we're just remaining very focused on that.
Well, there's no doubt about it. You're going to be a big part of the future of Newfoundland and Labrador, which I believe to be very bright. Michelle, back to you personally now. Do the two boys have an entrepreneurial spirit? I'm curious.
They definitely do. My youngest has been dragging his dad into the woods to cut trees so that he can make arrows. He's really into bow and arrow building. And the reason that he's doing that is because he wants to sell them at summer camp. So he's been very entrepreneurial. And he told me the other day that he got a tree from the woods at his summer camp, and he's making mulch out of the tree, and he's going to sell the mulch at the end of the summer. So he's very entrepreneurial. I think my oldest is much more like his dad. He's going to probably be an engineer. I don't think he's going to end up in the entrepreneurial world. But who knows? We keep encouraging them.
It's funny, Michelle, I have two boys as well. And, I've had a sideline business for 30 years. People calling at 11:30. Sometimes it scares people away, when they sit and see dad is on the phone talking business again at 11:30 at night. It's like, that can say to them, well, and you know what? That's great. But I think being entrepreneurial in your career is important. And I think your mom and dad should be incredibly proud of the entrepreneurial spirit you're showing. The center of technology in Newfoundland is phenomenal.
Mm-hmm.
Michelle, we often ask our guests to leave the audience with one small takeaway, a piece of advice, and maybe if you could reflect back on young Michelle Sims leaving St. Anthony for St. John's, what would you say? What would you say to her today, or beyond?
I would probably leave the audience with two pieces of advice. I think number one is if you have an idea or if you have that entrepreneurial bug and you think you'd like to start something, do it. And I think there's never been a better time. As a province, we have lots of supports for entrepreneurs, whether that's in the tech sector or in a non-tech environment. There's loads and loads and loads of supports out there right now. And then the other piece of advice that I would leave is if you have, if you think you'd be able to mentor or you would like to invest in a company or you have something to give the startup community, I would say connect with us and we will help you find the right location to put that either advice or knowledge, guidance, resources, what have you. We love connecting our entrepreneurs with other people who want to help.
Jerry, your final thoughts?
Honestly, I'm very rarely speechless, but I just love what you've outlined for us, Michelle. I think about St. Anthony and, your parents and the entrepreneurial spirit that they show. I always thought about business, Alan, you start a restaurant in New York, if you're doing a crappy job, you might take a year or two before so many people come through and you've made a few dollars. In Newfoundland, I think you got to get it right really quickly. I would imagine that's same for the tech industry. The other thing, Alan and I are talking a lot to people in the construction industry, and it's interesting to hear the stories of how technology, one of the guys was talking about an exoskeleton to help workers lift rocks and things. I mean, it's just the marrying of technology and older industries together is interesting to Alan and I. And anyway, I just want to say that, Michelle, I keep doing what you're doing. There's so much more success going to come out of what you're doing. I think it's just exciting. Alan and I think, and not to speak for you, Alan, you can speak for yourself as our followers know, but I think we are at the cusp of something special here. And I just love having a little tiny part in it, getting these stories out there. For 30 years, I've been out talking to people, Michelle, and, in the back rooms. And now with this little podcast we're doing, we get an opportunity to give you, there's lots of other forums out there, but at least a long form type of opportunity to tell people the story. Anyway, keep doing what you're doing. I look forward to hearing more and more about what the Genesis Center is doing. So sorry, long-winded Alan, over to you. You can tell I'm excited.
What another wonderful episode of Gale Force Winds. And thank you very much, Michelle, for joining us. The conversation around the level of collaboration in Newfoundland and Labrador right now is inspiring. And I hope that people understand that Newfoundland and Labrador is a wonderful place to come and be creative and be innovative, because there's a lot of support there. And the Genesis Center is in my opinion, the epicenter of how all of that works. And Michelle, you've been with it for a long time. You've got some great corporate knowledge there that you can pass on to companies that as they arrive and need that guidance to enter into this wonderful ecosystem in Newfoundland and Labrador. You've seen companies come through that are doing things that are globally recognized: underwater robotics, digital twinning for ships, financial management software, the likes of which the globe has never seen, have all come through your doorstep and received your mentorship and your guidance. Your work has been admirable. That's the only way I can describe that. I always leave the audience with my own piece of advice, and that is the world needs more Michelle Sims. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Alan and Jerry.
Thank you for tuning in to Gale Force Winds. That's Gale Force Winds, WINS.com.